The boardroom was silent when she walked in, except for the sharp click of her heels against the marble floor. Dozens of eyes followed her, some curious, some dismissive. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, cold and unforgiving. She straightened her blazer, steady breath, unaware that before the hour ended, the entire room would see her in a way no one expected. But first, she had to endure the sting of humiliation. Kayla Johnson was 23, a summer intern at one of New York's most prestigious investment firms. Every morning, she arrived earlier than anyone else, brewing coffee, organizing files, memorizing project details like her life depended on it. The scent of roasted beans and printer ink filled the air as she worked, her fingers moving fast across keyboards, her mind sharper than the suits who barely noticed her. She wanted to learn, to prove herself. But in this building, titles spoke louder than talent. On the 35th floor, power was everything. Executives wore arrogance like custom-tailored jackets. Among them was Richard Hale, a senior manager with a reputation for belittling anyone beneath him. He had a booming voice, a habit of interrupting, and a smile that never reached his eyes. He viewed interns as background noise, not people. And Kayla was about to become his next target. That morning, the firm was hosting a high-stakes meeting. A potential $3.2 billion merger was on the table. The boardroom smelled faintly of polished wood and expensive cologne. Laptops were open, charts glowed on large screens, tension thick as glass. Kayla's role was simple: assist with presentation materials, keep things running smoothly. She had triple-checked every slide, every chart. Still, her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the HDMI cable. "Make sure you don't mess this up," whispered a fellow intern, half joking, half warning. She forced a smile, nodding. Inside, her heart tapped against her ribs like a ticking clock. Then Richard entered. His navy suit caught the light, gold cufflinks flashing as he strode to the head of the table. "All right, people," he barked, "let's not waste time. We've got serious money on the line today." His gaze swept the room, then landed on Kayla. "Intern," he said, as if the word itself were a rank beneath dirt, "you're running the slides, right? Don't slow us down." The presentation began smoothly. Graphs shifted, figures rose and fell, voices droned in corporate rhythm. But midway through Richard's pitch, the screen froze. For 2 seconds. Then 5. A glitch. A minor one, but enough for him to turn slowly, like a predator sensing weakness. "What's going on?" His voice cut through the room. Kayla's fingers flew across the keyboard, trying to unfreeze the display. The system lagged, the spinning wheel mocking her every click. I'm fixing it," she whispered. He stepped closer, voice rising. "You had one job. One. How incompetent can you be?" A ripple of awkward silence spread across the table. Executives glanced at each other, some smirking, others looking away. Kayla's face burned. Her throat tightened, but she forced herself to keep breathing. The screen finally returned to normal, but the damage was done. Richard shook his head dramatically. "This is why interns shouldn't touch important work." His words landed like punches. She swallowed hard, blinking back the sting behind her eyes. She wanted to disappear, but she stayed rooted, refusing to let him see her break. The presentation resumed, but now, every tick of the clock echoed louder. Every side glance felt heavier. At the end of the meeting, Richard clapped his hands together. "Good job, team," he announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. Then, turning toward her, "and special thanks to our intern for almost tanking a multi-billion-dollar deal." Round of applause, everyone. Laughter burst out, sharp and cruel. Kayla froze, cheeks hot, hands numb against the laptop's cool surface. The moment carved itself into her memory. Humiliation had a way of etching deeper than praise ever could. But what no one in that room knew was this: Kayla was not just an intern. She was the daughter of Charles Johnson, a silent majority shareholder of the firm. She held legal power few even imagined existed. And Richard had just humiliated the future owner of everything he thought he controlled. Later that afternoon, as the sun cast golden stripes across the glass windows, Kayla entered her father's private office. The smell of leather and fresh paper filled the air. She wasn't crying. She was calm, collected, almost unnervingly steady. Her father raised an eyebrow. "Something happened," he said softly. She told him everything. Every word Richard said. Every laugh that followed. He leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. "You know, power doesn't speak loudly," he murmured, "it moves quietly, then strikes." A plan began to form. Not out of revenge, but out of necessity. Disrespect couldn't be ignored, not in business, and certainly not in their family legacy. The next morning, a confidential board meeting was scheduled. Senior partners were summoned without explanation. The entire firm buzzed with rumors. Richard strutted through the hallway, sipping his black coffee, oblivious. "Probably another financial strategy session," he said to a colleague, chuckling. He had no idea that his arrogance was about to collide with reality like glass against steel. The boardroom felt different that morning. The air was heavier, the blinds drawn halfway, allowing sharp streaks of light to slice through the shadows. Every executive sat upright, sensing something unusual. Phones were silenced, laptops closed. At the head of the table sat Charles Johnson, a man rarely seen in public company affairs. His presence alone made the room hold its breath. Richard walked in late, as usual. The door clicked behind him, loud in the silence. He glanced around, confused at the faces turned his way. "Did I miss something?" he asked with a smirk, sliding into his seat. No one laughed this time. Charles folded his hands slowly. "We're here to discuss leadership conduct," he said, his voice calm but weighted. "And the future of this firm." The way he emphasized future made Richard shift in his chair. Kayla sat at the far end of the table. No intern badge. No laptop. Just silent composure. She wore a tailored black suit, the kind that whispered authority. Richard noticed her but dismissed it with a slight scoff. In his mind, she was still the intern he'd humiliated. Charles clicked a remote. The screen lit up with a security recording from the previous day's meeting. Richard's voice echoed through the speakers. "You had one job. How incompetent can you be?" Laughter followed, just like before. But now, it wasn't amusing. It was damning. The replay ended. The silence that followed was brutal. Every executive's eyes turned toward Richard. His confident smile faltered. "This is out of context," he began, trying to regain footing. It was a tense moment, and Charles raised a hand. Richard stopped mid-sentence. "Tense moments," Charles said evenly, "reveal true character. Not excuses." Then he turned to Kayla. "Would you like to introduce yourself?" Kayla stood. The sound of her chair sliding back echoed like a gavel. She took a breath, calm and deliberate. "My name is Kayla Johnson," she said, her voice steady, daughter of Charles Johnson, majority shareholder of this firm, and as of this week, a new member of the board. Richard's face drained of color. She stepped closer, locking eyes with him. "Yesterday, you mocked me publicly," she continued, not knowing who I was. "But this isn't about titles. It's about how you treat people when you think no one's watching." A murmur rippled through the room. Someone shifted papers nervously. Richard tried to speak again, but words caught in his throat. Charles leaned forward. "Effective immediately," he said, "Richard Hale will be removed from his managerial position pending review. Arrogance is not leadership. Disrespect has no place here." The finality in his tone was like a hammer striking steel. Richard opened his mouth, closed it again, realizing no one in the room stood with him. The same people who once laughed at his jokes now avoided his gaze. Power had shifted, quietly and completely. Kayla didn't gloat. She didn't need to. Her silence was louder than his humiliation had ever been. As the meeting ended, executives gathered around her, offering handshakes and nervous smiles. They saw her differently now, not as an intern, but as someone who held the future of the firm in her hands. Outside, the city hummed, oblivious to the storm that had just passed inside those glass walls. Richard walked out alone. The same hallway where he once strutted now felt narrower, colder. His reflection in the mirrored elevator doors stared back at him, smaller than he remembered. Arrogance had blinded him. Reality had humbled him. Kayla returned to her office, her real office now. She looked out at the skyline, morning light reflecting off the towers. The humiliation she endured hadn't broken her. It had revealed the truth. Power isn't always loud. Sometimes it waits, patient and silent, until the right moment to strike. And when it does, it doesn't just reverse roles. It rewrites the entire story. So the question remains, how many Richards are out there, laughing too soon, never realizing who's watching?